Hello, you're watching GMT on BBC World News. I'm Alice Baxter. Our top stories: more valuable than gold and opium. Afghanistan's saffron flour could boost the country's economic fortunes, but over 1 million are still addicted to opium.
British forces came to Helmand 12 years ago with the principal reason of stopping poppy growing. A record harvest in the year that they leave is a mark of failure.
And it's the most expensive artwork ever sold at auction. We ask, was it worth it? Also coming up in the programme, Harren's here, of course, and looking at the cost of Typhoon Haiyan for us.
Yeah, absolutely, Alice. It is one of the fastest growing economies in Asia, in fact described as a rising economic star and growing faster than the likes of India and Vietnam. It is a diverse economy, and with the storm missing the capital, Manila, we take a look at just how much damage was caused to the Philippine economy.
Hello there. Now, across Afghanistan, you'll find sprawling fields that look much like this, planted with poppies. Well, despite efforts to stamp out opium cultivation, a United Nations report has found that the country's drug harvest has hit a record high. Well, it's increased by 36% in a year, with supply now outstripping global demand. Our Afghanistan correspondent David Lloyn has sent this report from the Iranian border.
Flowers being picked in Afghanistan, where most of the world's opium poppies are grown. But these are not opium poppies. They're the only crop that brings a higher price. Saffron. The fragile flowers are carefully weighed and then each picked apart to reveal the 3 red cords that give the taste and colour of a spice that is literally worth its weight in gold. This saffron farmer in Herat used to grow opium poppies, and now the Afghan government is sponsoring saffron growing in neighbouring Helmand, a desperate attempt in the year of a record harvest to reduce poppy growing there. Nothing else has worked, and signs of the failure to stop poppies are everywhere. Afghanistan has more than 1 million addicts living on the margins of society. The police do seize some drugs. Locked in a storeroom in Herat, we found oozing sacks of opium, and in its refined form, heroin. This is raw opium, the product of poppies, most of which in Afghanistan are grown in Helmand. British forces came to Helmand 12 years ago with the principal reason of stopping poppy growing. A record harvest in the year that they leave is a mark of failure. We went to the Iranian border with police who are trying to stop the tide of drugs flooding out of the country. They do a random search of some trucks, but most are not searched at all. The deputy head of the border police, Haji Abdul Sattar, said he thought that every day up to 10 trucks get through carrying drugs. He said they work tirelessly, but the drugs are often built into the vehicles and they can't take apart every truck. A minivan arrived with its seats tied to the roof to give space to a coffin being collected at the border by the family of Safiullah, killed by Iranian police trying to cross over illegally. One place close to the border is now called Widow's Village, since so many young men have been killed trying to go into Iran carrying sacks of drugs. The village elder Ghulam Sawar said that only women and small children are left. The young men are all dead, shot by Iranians on the border or captured and hanged as smugglers. The results of the failure to stop this trade scar Afghanistan and the world outside. David Lloyn, BBC News, close to the Afghan-Iran border.
Well, David Lloyn, the author of that report, now joins me live from our BBC Kabul bureau. David, you describe this record harvest in the year that British forces leave Afghanistan as a mark of failure. But has any progress at all been made in trying to stem the poppy farming?
Well, there was some progress. This is the really curious thing. After that peak of 2007, 197,000 hectares planted, it did reduce again, but it's never gone back down to, as it were, the standard level of Afghan planting, the 70 or 80,000 hectares, which were the case before the international invasion in 2001. And it has been a really persistent problem, fueled, I have to say, by aid money. As aid money has leaked out of the legal economy, it's pushed up poppy prices, it's made it much harder to deal with this illicit economy. And the head of the UN Office for Drugs and Crimes here, Jean-Luc Lemerhier, says that he believes the illicit economy will get even bigger next year as the international community withdraw and there's more competition, not just for drugs, but for mining interests, timber interests and so on.
David, you began your report by describing how the government in Afghanistan is trying to sponsor saffron growing to encourage farmers to turn away from poppies and move towards the saffron flower. Why has that not taken root?
Well, it's beginning to work. The man you saw in that report, the king of saffron, as they call him in Herat, used to say this was an Iranian secret. He used to grow poppies himself. And in some of those provinces in the west, particularly Herat, saffron growing has taken root. It is the only crop that outstrips opium poppies. I have to say, potatoes and onions and tomatoes are pretty close to opium, but there aren't the market for those crops. And there is now a possibility that saffron, which is being given to farmers across a number of pilot projects in Helmand, could provide the answer, because it's the only thing which is close to opium or that really outstrips opium for farmers. It's very easy to grow. It comes out of the ground at this time of the year. It has to be harvested very carefully. But I have to say, without markets and without security, all of these alternative livelihood projects have failed in the past, and there's a fear that saffron could go the way of those other ones.
So many challenges still ahead. David, many thanks. David Lloyn there joining us from our BBC Kabul bureau. Well, with me now here in the studio is Amal Pasabli from the BBC's Afghan service. Amal, just describe for me, if you will, how important poppy farming is to normal Afghans living out in rural farms.
For the farmers, I will say that it is hugely important. Why? Because it's a cash crop, and the value is very high, and apparently needs less water. And most importantly, the buyer is available. They are available at your doorstep, and in some cases, they are even ready to pay you well in advance. So it's easy to grow in that sense.
So it's easy to produce, and we often look at this from an international perspective, don't we? The impact that the poppy farming has on users around the world. But within Afghanistan, it's also created a huge number of people dependent on the drugs. In that report, we were hearing over 1 million people inside the country. Is opium dependency a real issue in Afghanistan?
It is. A while ago, a decade ago, Afghan addicts number were in thousand. Now there are more than 1 million. Today, for instance, at the BBC Afghan service, we asked this question from our audience, and a lot of them say that they are worried about it, and they are concerned because the drug is not only going outside but consumed inside the country.
And forces preparing to leave Afghanistan. David Lloyd there saying that people he was speaking to in the country are worried the situation will now only get worse.
Well, before the international forces in Afghanistan, for instance, in Helmand, Taliban banned poppy cultivation in their last year of the government, and there was no poppy at all. So local people think that it's nothing to do with the foreign troops, perhaps. It has to do more with a proper message, a proper program. A lot of people are saying that there was mixed messages from the international community and also from the Afghan government. Once they were paying farmers not to grow, then they stopped that. Then they said, we have nothing to do with your poppy. So there was a lot of mixed messages. A proper program perhaps will stop that.
So a cohesive clearer strategy required. Emil, many thanks. Emil Passabli there from the BBC's Afghan service. Good to talk to you. OK, time now to get a little bit of business news. Aaron's here as ever.
Yep, talking about Starbucks, kind of a bit of bean to swallow, Alice. Chi-chi. Hello there. American coffee giant Starbucks has been hit with a damages bill worth, I think it's coming up nearly, there you go, nearly $3 billion. Now, the company's being forced to compensate Kraft Foods to settle a rift over a deal to distribute its coffee in grocery stores. Now, Kraft blames Starbucks for ending the distribution agreement 3 years too early. I say a bit of bean to swallow because the charge, this price, it is equal to Starbucks' entire net income since the start of 2012. Ouch. Theo Leggett has all the details.
Starbucks is best known for its coffee shops, a familiar sight in high streets and shopping centres around the world. But it also produces a range of branded products for sale in supermarkets and grocery stores. Between 1998 and 2011, the foods giant Kraft was responsible for selling bags of coffee to retailers. But the deal ended early. Starbucks accused its partner of breaching its contract on multiple levels and of mismanaging the Starbucks brand. Kraft denied the charge, claiming it had boosted sales of Starbucks coffee dramatically. Now Starbucks is paying a heavy price for its decision. Following a bitter legal battle, an arbitrator has decided it should pay compensation worth $2.75 billion. That includes $2.23 billion in damages, plus interest and legal fees. The money will go to Mondelez, the former parent company of Kraft Foods. It's a significant blow to Starbucks, which made a net profit of just $1.7 billion in the past financial year. However, the firm says it has plenty of cash on its books and can also borrow to fund the payment. Theo Leggett, BBC News.
OK, let's move on. Let's talk about this. First and foremost, it is, of course, a humanitarian disaster. But Typhoon Haiyan, which has ravaged parts of the Philippines, will also, no doubt, of course, have a huge economic consequence. Haiyan hit at a time of growth for the Philippines. It's been described, in fact, as Southeast Asia's rising economic star, all motored by, well, diverse industries, including outsourced centres, those call centres, electronics, factories and agriculture. Let's look at some of the numbers. Growth in the Philippines topped the economy, topped this 7%. Not bad for the past 4 quarters. That is the fastest pace in the region, certainly growing faster than the likes of India and Vietnam. Not China, though. Now, there is no question, of course, this recent typhoon will slow some of that growth. Losses are expected to reach anywhere between, so far, it is very early, but so far between $12 to $15 billion. That would knock off about 5% of the country's economic output. The storm struck 2 important economic regions, the agriculture province of Leyte, where crops like sugarcane and rice have been destroyed. In fact, hearing about half of the country's sugarcane and a third of its rice fields have been destroyed. And also the Cebu province, home to certainly thriving outsourcing operations. Now, though the economic damage will be far-reaching, some experts are saying it could have been worse. Why? Well, let's take a look, because the capital right here, Manila, home of some strong outsourcing operations, manufacturing centres. 12% of the population live in Manila, and Manila is responsible for about 1/3 of the country's economic output. Manila emerged relatively unscathed from the storm. So interesting stuff. Let's go straight over to Robert Muir-Wood, who is Chief Research Officer at Catastrophe Modeller Risk Management Solutions. Robert, great to have you with us. Let's start with, I guess, the sums. I mean, this is a country that pretty much has to cough up about $5 billion every year due to storms, but this one will cost, well, so far, early estimates, $12 to $15 billion. But they're very early. I mean, these numbers could rise, right?
I think they are reasonably robust, these estimates. This storm has gone through, as you've already said, an area which is principally rural. It's got a few medium-sized towns within it. It's actually, the storm has missed the biggest concentrations of economic activity and population, and it's this zone about 150 kilometers wide, and with an interior zone where there's going to be total destruction, maybe 20 or 30 kilometers wide. So there's a hinterland beyond that zone which is able to assist in the recovery of the storm damage itself.
Robert, talking of assisting, I think these are some astonishing numbers. Some experts are saying that this recovery will be helped by the fact that many Filipinos have relatives who live overseas and work overseas. They send money home. It's called remittances. And apparently, this makes up 10% of the Filipino economy, $21 billion a year.
Yeah, remittances are a big deal in a country like Philippines. People go overseas, they get much better paid there, they send the money back. And in fact, one thing we've seen after disasters, typically in the year following, the remittances will go up significantly because people will have these stories of members of their own family who've been really badly impacted, who need money to rebuild their houses. There's going to be very, very little insurance in this area. Everybody is going to be dependent on money being handed to them either through the government aid or international aid or remittances of this kind.
Very briefly, if we can, infrastructure, pretty poor. The government spend very little on infrastructure, but from this devastation, I mean, do you think lessons will be learned when it comes to the reconstruction?
Well, I mean, one key issue I'm very focused on is actually why so many people died in this event. They died because they appear to have stayed in these zones which were prone to the storm surge, and they actually should have been warned in advance and they should have been moved out. Now, one hopes going forward that actually reconstruction does not take place in the lowest lying areas, that actually some of these settlements are moved back to slightly higher ground. So the next time this event happens, because this is an area which is significantly impacted by these typhoons pretty frequently, next time this happens, there should not be this kind of loss of life.
Oh, certainly, let's hope so. Robert, great stuff. We appreciate your time. Thank you very much for joining us. Robert Muir-Wood joining us from Risk Management Solutions. You got any questions? You want to send me a tweet? Follow me on Twitter. It's easy, at BBC Aaron. I'll tweet you right back. That's it with the business, Alice. I'll see you later on.
Thanks very much, Aaron. See you later. Well, do stay with us here on BBC World News. Still to come, Francis Bacon's painting has become the most expensive artwork ever to be sold at auction. Stay watching to find out how much it went for.
It's about energy. Energy of motion. Energy of revelation. Energy of feelings. Energy of creation. Energy of life. Invest in Astana, City of Future Energy.
The crisis of the young and jobless is deepening. More than 73 million young people are unemployed around the world, and the predictions are the numbers are set to rise. Young people are 3 times more likely to be out of work than other adults, and the impact of that is serious for us all. Academics say unemployment for a young person can damage their wages, job satisfaction and even their health for decades to come. The problem is worst in North Africa and the Middle East, where governments have been toppled because of it. But it's getting worse in Europe, in North America and in other developed countries. There, unemployment has risen by 1/4 since 2008. And they're taking to the streets to demand answers, which is why global leaders say they need to fix it. In November and December, across the BBC, we'll be hearing the stories behind the numbers. We'll meet the young and jobless and those trying to get them into work.
With the vast changes in the global economy, understanding what lies behind the headlines matters more than ever. Talking Business with me, Linda Yu, will examine the trends that are reshaping our world. We will focus on what those changes mean for our everyday lives through insightful discussions, distinctive films, and interviews with key personalities at work and at play. Join me each week to talk business on BBC World News.
Technology has helped improve lives and cure illnesses, but now something new is happening. The world of engineering and medicine are coming together to create new kinds of advances. Join me, Adam Shaw, for Horizons on BBC World News.
Hello there, I'm Alice Baxter. Our top story. 5 days after Typhoon Haiyan struck the Philippines, there are signs that food and aid are starting to reach the worst affected areas. Now, a painting by the British-based artist Francis Bacon has become the most expensive work ever to be sold at auction. The painting, 3 studies of Lucien Freud, fetched more than, wait for it, $142 million at Christie's in New York. The BBC's Richard Lister reports.
Ladies and gentlemen, the magnificent triptych of Lucien Freud by Francis Bacon of 1969. Wonderful thing, here it is.
The pre-sale estimate for this work was around $14 million, but after just a few minutes of frantic bidding, it had reached 10 times that.
Sold at $127 million.
With the additional fees, the total was more than $142 million, paid by an anonymous buyer.
These triptychs are incredibly rare. The previous record for a work of art at auction is just over $100 million, so for us to see 142 tonight is something quite extraordinary. It may be many years before that figure is broken.
The 3 studies of Lucien Freud have been in private collections and only brought together in the 1980s. Part of the triptych's value lies in the fact that it's a study of one iconic artist by another. But Francis Bacon's also regarded as one of the most important British artists of the past century.
Bacon has really taken on Cubism, Picasso's brand of Cubism, and moved it into the late 20th century by cutting the head in half and showing it moving across the panel, showing the feet moving as well, and the hands fidgeting. And in each individual panel you see that movement.
There were other records set last night too. Overall, the sale made more than any other auction, bringing in almost $700 million. Bacon regarded this triptych as one of his favourite works, and it may be some time before it's seen again. Richard Lister, BBC News.
Well, with me now in the studio is art historian Godfrey Barker. Good to see you, Godfrey. $142 million for a piece of art. Is this the world gone mad?
Well, after hurricanes and drug smuggling from Afghanistan, this is not just another planet. I mean, this is another world. But last night at Christie's New York, the world's super rich, with money flowing out of their pockets, bid $142 million, nearly £90 million, to set a new record for any artwork at auction. At one level, it's crazy. This money would build a dozen hospitals. But who are we to say that the rich should not spend their money as they wish?
And it wasn't just the Bacon piece that's made headlines. We also saw the highest price ever paid for a living artist as well at Christie's.
That was Jeff Koons and the Balloon Dog, $58 million. It was the highest priced auction ever in history, $691 million. It could be beaten again tonight in Geneva by a pink diamond, which could sell for $150 million. There are reasons why this goes on.
Well, let's talk about those reasons. Let's talk about the Francis Bacon piece. Why did it attract this huge sum?
Well, the first thought is that it's not the price that matters, it's the profit. If you're going to sell this triptych in 5 or 10 years' time for twice the price, then actually the more you pay, the happier you are, because your reward is going to be that much bigger. Same with Edvard Munch's Scream last year, $119 million. The second thing is that art masterpieces at the very top of the market are a more stable bet for the world's super rich than anything that comes up on Wall Street, which goes up and down, but art masterpieces simply do that.
So perhaps whereas people used to invest in gold as a safe haven, they're now looking to fine art. You mentioned the super rich and the internationalisation of the art market, if you like. We don't know who bought the Bacon piece, but we can speculate. Who do you think was behind that winning phone call?
Well, the man in the room who lifted his hand was the New York dealer William Aquavella, one of the most discreet and secret people in the art business. But it's not difficult to work out who the punch-out is likely to be between, because there were 6 bidders, by the way, still in it at $100 million. Gosh. But in the last few years, at the very top, in the finale, it has been in the red corner, a Russian oligarch, and in the blue corner, an Arab sheikh. Typically, it's the Emir of Qatar. 6 years ago, when Francis Bacon hit $86 million, then a record for an artwork, it was Roman Abramovich, the owner of the Chelsea Football Club. They might have had a repeat match last night. And by the way, in the year 2000, the top price for Francis Bacon was just under $1 million. And 13 years later, here we are at 142. In private, it's probably even higher. Now you understand why Wall Street is not delivering the goods.
Where will the prices ever stop? The atmosphere in that room must have been palpable, the tension. Godfrey, many thanks. Godfrey Barker there. OK, that's all from GMT today. But here's Lucy now. Tell us what's coming up in Impact up next.
Thanks, Alice. In just a few minutes here on Impact, we'll be live in the Philippines with all the very latest from